you say to, okay, a bank directs the current, it directs the currency. The current deposits things on the bank. The current withdraws from the bank. Look at cash flow. Look at directorship, company directorship, directing the ship. On board, you're on the board of the company. There's so many things that are staring us in. But see, the best way to hide something is to put it in plain sight.
Yeah,
it's the best way to hide it. If you're going to hide something, then you just put it in plain sight. Because we look past the end of our nose. We don't look at, we don't see things that are right on the end of our nose. We look straight past it and the reason we're doing that is because we're always thinking that things are more complicated than they are. And someone said to me recently, there's a famous saying, I think, therefore I am. Yeah. I believe it's Rene Descartes, or saying his name is, who did this famous saying. But my friend rang me up and he said, I think, therefore I am confused. And it's absolutely true, because the more you think about it, the more bloody confused you get about it. If you don't think about it in the first place, I talk about something that's called a soul projection. Now, when I see the brain as two things, only two things as well, I see it as being a gearbox for the body and the means of the soul being able to project something to you.
Yeah.
So it's a projector. Yeah. So a screen, if you like. What happens is if I want to know something, then I deliberately don't think about it. I try not to. It's very, very difficult, but I try not to think about it. All of a sudden, something pops into my head. Now, I haven't thought about it, and that's basically what I call a soul projection. When you can actually learn to differentiate between the two, because you have to know both, because it's like slavery. You can't know the difference between being a slave and not being a slave until you experience both things. Otherwise, you've got nothing to differentiate against. You've got to know both sides. Otherwise, it's like, if I was just a slave and always a slave for the rest of my life, then all I would ever know was slavery, and I'd never have something to parallel it against, or actually say, okay, well, this is different to that, so there must be a difference. What's happened to me is I've just worked out there's a difference. And what happened was I could actually step outside of the person, the ego, and look back. And actually, it's really strange, because when you actually do this, when you actually step outside the person and you look back, you see things completely transparently, and you see through them. And what you actually see is a very, very complicated mire of rubbish, absolute rubbish, a legal illusion that the world runs under, and you see it's got a very, very simple foundation, and the very simple foundation is the evolution of slavery. That's all it is. The socially dominant need to maintain that everything works in the world. The predominant workforce of any company, corporation, country, whatever you want to say, is always slaves. It has to be. That's the only way they can possibly get it to work. Because otherwise, everyone will strive to be the socially dominant.
Yeah.
And then you end up where you've got a system. It's like you won't, I've seen this with my own. I'll give you an example, right? What I'm saying. My partner was watching Parliament the other night. She actually finds it very funny because it's theatre. It's a bit like Shakespeare says, the world's a stage and everybody's acting.
Yeah, there you go.
And if you look at statutes, they become acts. Acts of Parliament become statutes. Acts. Everything is acts. So when you look at the characters, the legal character, the status, when you look at, and I talked about the prestige, when an actor gets to a certain prestige, he gets a bigger dressing room. Now, I know that sounds really daft, but when you look at the structure of our law, when you get to a certain legal character, the status, you get to that, there's another set of laws that are in place for you to use, and you're not affected by, and it's basically public and private statutes. And I've only just realised this, and it's called public and private statutes, and I will explain what I'm talking about. But what you're saying, everything is an act. So everything in the world is an act, because none of it's real. So when you can see this, and you can actually see it going on, and we were watching Parliament. Anyway, afterwards there was a group of individuals, MPs and some people sat round a table talking, as they generally do, guff. And this lady MP, and I'll call her Mrs. Blears because I don't know her first name, Mrs. Blears turned round and said, I have a lot of respect for the ordinary people. Now, I don't really have to say anymore. What I'm saying is, I turned round to my partner and said, so who does she think she is?
Yeah, there you go.
She's not an ordinary, she's not part of the ordinary people. And you can actually see this ego. It's the ego. It's taken hold of her, and it's actually saying to the human being, you're not in control anymore. I have control, and I'm going to maintain control. All I've done is sever that connection. That's all I've done. I've severed it. I've realised there's an ego there. Because like I said, you've got to know what the ego is to differentiate between having one and not having one. And I don't always succeed. Believe me, it's a battle every single bloody day. Yeah. I sometimes look back at some of the conversations I've had, some of the things I've been, some of the time, and I look back and I get a message, I kind of, cool, he was really egotistic there. He was really egotistic, and I said, yeah, okay, but at least I recognise it. And that's what I'm starting to see now. I actually recognise my own faults when the ego actually steps in. But what we've got, their legal world works. If you go back into Roman civilist law and you look at person, all the way back into Roman law, as early as you can go, you will find that they were attributing the word person to a man. But what they don't tell you is that even though in grammar person is synonymous with men, not all men are persons because slaves were classed as things. And that's where you get status is the legal condition, character or condition of a person or a thing, because they were talking about slaves.
Yeah, okay.
And we still classed as things.
So that's, would you say then that everyone is a slave under the system, meaning that everyone is considered a thing, even though you're higher up the ladder, so to speak, of status? Or they're still under the same...
It's the thing, isn't it? You still... See, the point is, what do they tell you when you're at school? You got to work hard, you got to get qualifications, you got to think, you got to do this, you got to go to university, you got to get a mortgage. It's all traps.
Yeah.
It's all works on the ego. I've got a bigger house than you. I've got a Porsche. I've got this. I've got that. I know. I've been there. I used to do it. I used to have a better car than my next door neighbour. If he got a better car, I got a better car. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely pathetic. What size telly you got? 42 inch. Oh, I've got a 52 inch. It's unbelievable. But this is how the world operates.
Pretty much.
It operates. Their world operates on. And the thing, it cracks me up now when I can actually see it now, and I can actually sometimes I feel myself being sucked back down the rabbit hole. You do actually feel it. It's got hold of your ankles and it's dragging you back down. You might be having a bad day. You might be, feeling a bit. I don't know. It happens to all of us, and you might feel. And then all of a sudden, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, I wish I lived in this. And it's like you can feel this grab hold of you and actually suck you under. And it's like being in quicksand. And that's what the ego does. Because the ego comes out fighting. And I've noticed this now when I talk when I did a talk down at the Foundry in London, 24th, and there was a lawyer sat in the audience with a copy of Black's Law Dictionary. And he was lovely. I had a chat with him after, and he was very, very nice. It was very interesting because they're very, very scared about their illusion being broken down. And someone said to me recently in a phone call, they said, "You're out of your mind. You need psychiatric treatment." And I said, "Well, I'm quite honest with you," I said, "to be out of your mind takes years of practice."
There you go.
Because to get away from the ego, the person, it does take practice. Because this thing is so powerful, this affliction of the human mind is so powerful that the slightest little chance it can take back control, it will. Every argument in the world is not human beings arguing, it's the egos trying to get one over on the other ego. Yeah. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You look at it, and my opinion, is better than your opinion, or my opinion is the truth. And I noticed that by looking back at my Stoke talk, that I might as well have been an evangelist. I was preaching to people. I was shouting. You can't do that. Well, that's the ego.
It depends on also. I mean, in some regard, I understand what you're saying, where you're coming from, and I think that that's part of the personal development, if you will. But people also have to be woken up, as it were. So it's nothing wrong with it. I also see that it's a purpose to that, and I think that it's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a double-edged. I do see it's a double-edged sword, but I also see it the Messiah complex, and that's the problem.
That's always there. Yeah, sure.
We live in the Messiah complex, and everything is the Messiah complex. You mean, for some reason, human beings believe someone's coming to save them, when the truth of the matter is, you have to save yourself.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
And that's the point. It's the Messiah complex. Look at the films that are coming out. There's always these bloody Messiah complexes in it. A human being sacrifices himself for the rest of mankind. The point is, if you want to look at the metaphorically about Jesus, if you want to look at that metaphorically, what Jesus was actually saying is sacrifice the person, the ego. Once you sacrifice the ego, then you can live. Then you can live life properly, and we'll have a beautiful place. We live in the most beautiful place. We really do. It is the most wonderful place. But you only see it when you lose the eyes of the ego. When you see it through human eyes, I say human, but I don't really, even that word, I don't even like that word. When I see it through without the ego actually seeing everything, I see everything. I see the most amazing world. People are looking in space and they're on about, this is so funny, species. There's other species. We've got millions of species on this bloody planet we can't even connect to.
Yeah.
Why would we be looking for elsewhere?
Yeah. Well, it's all that externalization again. And again, it's a reflection that we're not looking at what we already have here. The green is always, greener on the other side, etc.
Someone said to me about lions, right? They said to me, I said, funny enough, we were talking about lions, and I said to someone, how would you love to walk up to a lion and get a cuddle? And they were just laughing at me, because they honestly do believe I'm out of my mind. And I said, yeah, but I said, why do you feel you can't walk up to a lion and give it a cuddle? And they said, well, they smell fear. I said, well, is it more to the point? A lion knows what you'll do to your own kind, let alone what you'll do to it. And it's true. Look what we do to each other. And what does it? Where does it always point back to? The ego. War is about ego. I've got a bigger army than you. I've got this. I've got this piece of land. It's mine. How can you own something? How can you own land? It's not even our bloody planet. Who says it's ours? It's we've got this most beautiful place to live in, which we're meant to be the caretakers of. We're meant to look after it. That's what we're meant to hear. Not to destroy it, not to rape it, not to claim it, not to kill people because they've stepped onto this so-called piece of land that we own. It's ridiculous. Yeah. There's no one. I kind of look at it this way. Mankind only changes when it's at the epitome of its own destruction. Because that's the only time it will actually change. And if you look back at your life and I look back at my life, the amount of changes that I've made in my life because I've been at the point I am about to lose something that I absolutely love or I adore. And I've changed because I don't want to lose it. And that is exactly and that's what's happening to the world. No one can actually, I don't know what's going to come in the future because as far as I'm concerned, there is no future. I make the future now. What I do today and what I try, and the love that I give and the way that I fight the ego is actually creating what will be tomorrow. The past has gone. The future's not here yet. So all we have is now.
Yeah.
So if we try and make now as good as we possibly can, then surely that is the foundation for the future we want. So if you want to see change in the world, be the change you want to see.
Yeah. It's very simple, isn't it? Yeah.
It's so it is, it's so simple. It is really simple.
I think the idea also of tragedy as a catalyst